Well, welcome everybody. I'm very aware that people are coming in from sort of a range of backgrounds and with a range of interests this evening, and I'll try and accommodate that as best I can. But this isn't actually a general update about everything that we're doing. What I'm trying to do with these sort of monthly get-togethers is maybe just focus on one phase of our work or one aspect of our work, and just explaining that particular aspect. I've entitled the talk our finest year, which sounds sort of vaguely Churchillian, and for good reason. This is the time of the year when, unfortunately, you just have to sit down and write your annual report, which is one of these tasks that you just don't look forward to, but it has to be done, and you're putting together all the figures from last year, etc., etc. And I've subtitled that annual report "Our Finest Year," which is an odd subtitle, really, when you sort of reflect upon how we've sort of taken a 27% drop in income in 2020 compared to the previous year, which is actually not anywhere near as bad as a lot of the other charities that are working overseas. So we actually held up very well. But notwithstanding that severe knock that we took, in my opinion, last year represented some of the best work that we've ever done as a charity. It really was backs to the wall, and maybe just as in 1940, it sort of brought the best out of us. And in large part, that really was due to one person. And I'll be talking a bit about him this evening, and how we're supporting him in Nepal. Just to give the background a little bit on that, rewind to sort of February last year, and I went down to this part of Nepal, just close to the Indian border, on a sort of fact-finding visit with Trustee Caroline Milne. We were going down to investigate the possibility of setting up a refuge for girls. Now, we're in this part of the Nepal because it's a bit of a hot spot for so-called gender-based violence, so violence against women and girls, all kinds of abuse, including rape. And our work at that time was very much based in Kathmandu, and we were looking at the possibility of setting up a refuge for girls with support services a bit closer to the actual point of immediate needs. And we might have seen this picture before. That's the kind of scenery in that part of Nepal. There isn't a mountain in sight. It's totally flat. In the background, you can see mud huts with thatched roofs and so on. It's extremely poor. On that visit, it's very important to find a host, a local person who can show you around and give you an insight into needs and so on. And the person that we were introduced to, or we were told to contact, is this chap called Dev Narayan Mandal. And we were told at the time, well, Dev, he works in the forests and so on, and that's his big thing. But he is very well networked in the area. He knows everybody. And if you want to find out what's going on in that particular area, he's as good a host as you're going to get. And that was what happened. We met up with Dev, and he showed us around the villages, and we looked at the girls and the women and the various challenges that they're facing in their daily lives. And then we went back to Kathmandu, and then 2 days later, Caroline and I went back to find out more, sort of informally, which was great. And Dev took us for a walk into his forest, and he's standing in this forest, and it's quite interesting because all the trees that are around him are all about 10 to 15 years old, and that's because he's planted them himself. This is a forest that he grew up in. He played there as a child, and in adult life he went off to India and worked in Delhi. And he was away for 10 years, and he came back to find the forest was absolutely decimated by illegal logging and activities like that. So he decided to stay in Nepal and see if he could restore this beloved forest of his. The way he went about it was actually very, very clever, and is very clever, and that is, it's all about community engagement rather than planting trees. And it was very timely, really, for me personally, because at this stage I was getting very interested, or almost preoccupied, with the climate and climate change and this environmental catastrophe that we're facing at the minute. And having seen what this guy had done with his own hands through community engagement, he was getting retired forestry workers to volunteer with him to help, and he was just making things happen. And it was really from that I went back to the UK, and I contacted my great friends Gemma and Chris McGough, for running a charitable foundation. and we decided that we would do a reforestation project of all things and support this very sort of inspirational man in what he's doing. And that led to an awful lot of work being done that started in June last year. We launched a reforestation project in June last year, and this is one of the two elements of our work last year which contributed to that so-called finest year. The project involved restoration of 32 hectares of community forest in this Danusha district. Again, just denuded land, and you can see with the ladies here, the mainly women actually, who are digging pits, and then they're planting saplings, they're clearing away invasive scrub, and then nurturing the plants. This is a 2.5-year project. It was a massive piece of finance, really. The McGough Foundation essentially contributed £150,000, to which was added £67,000 from the Nepal Department of Forestry. So it was a £197,000 project over 2.5 years, which was absolutely amazing against that backdrop of plummeting, general income. The second element, by the way, which is linked to this, was also due entirely to DEV, and that is our response to the COVID lockdown in Nepal, where we, through public appeal, public generosity, we were able to feed 28,000 people across 15 districts in this part of Nepal. And how did we do that? Again, it was DEV, through his network, through his contacts, and people just getting together and making it happen. So those were the two big elements last year that contributed to the so-called finest year. But I want to talk just a little bit now about the subject of for reforestation, because it's not just about planting trees. It goes way beyond that, and it's really, as much as anything else, it's an exercise in empowerment, a very overused word within the development sector. If you go right back to the 1950s, Nepal was getting into a very bad state at that time because of deforestation, and the hills were being stripped bare, the forests were under national control, under government control, and they just weren't being managed or maintained. They were really facing an environmental disaster over the 1960s, 1970s. If you look at Nepal now, the forest cover has doubled over the last 25 years. It has gone from 26% forest cover in 1992 to an amazing 45% last year. 45% forest cover is incredible when you consider that the forest cover in the UK is 13%. Nepal has really bucked the trend also in the developing world, where deforestation is such a major issue. It is an issue in certain parts of Nepal locally, but generally speaking, there is a very big net gain of forest. They've managed to do it by setting up so-called community forest user groups. In other words, they've handed over the management of community forests, of forest areas, to local people who have got a vested interest in maintaining the forest, which is a source of their livelihoods. It's where they get their fodder for their animals. It's potentially where they harvest forest products for sale. That is how this amazing transformation has happened. And what they have at the minute in Nepal, again, incredible figures, about a third of the population are registered within community forest user groups, and about a third of the forest cover in Nepal is managed by the community. These forest groups are representative of local people, often of marginalized people, and there's that gender balance in there of male, female as well. So it's an exercise, as I say, in empowerment as well. The committees who run these various community forest user groups are elected and they're accountable. The particular area that we're in here, which is a place called Batagadi, there is a committee which is in charge of that community forest area. It's 50-50 male-female. It so happens that the chairman is male, but there we are. In other areas, you might find that the committees are entirely female. Now, this is quite impressive, not just in terms of how they've restored forest cover, but also in terms of the kind of social benefit that has come from this. And as a for example, and this is why it is really important as I see it in the future, Nepal is facing a lot of disasters now because of climate change. The droughts, the floods, and all the rest of it. The response to that is going to be vital to save lives and to save livelihoods. And that response is going to come from these community forest user groups. We've seen that already in 2015 when they had the big earthquakes in Nepal. Who were responding? It was these people, the people who were on the ground, who had a quick response at the time. They were able to produce wood, to set up shelters and all the rest of it. So while the central government was tied up in bureaucracy and dilly-dallying and so on, and for that matter, while NGOs, non-governmental organizations, were slow to respond as well, or they would come in and go away again, it was actually these community-based groups who are there all the time, who were in straight away with the response, and who were there over the subsequent months to help the people who were most impacted by that disaster. They had exactly the same thing with COVID last year. Again, these community forest user groups were central to that response. How was that? When there was food relief being distributed, these groups were able to identify the people who were at most need, who were in genuine need of food relief, the old, the infirm, those single parent families, and make sure that those resources are distributed. So when I look at the response to climate change and what we should be doing about it, well, planting trees is great. It's really important to do that. I think it's very important that communities get into harmony with the natural environment, and the same applies in this country, by the way, as it does in Nepal. We need to get that balance, which is lacking. The thing that is really important in as I see it, for climate change, the countries that need to be addressing this in terms of greenhouse gases are the countries that are actually producing the gases, not Nepal. I mean, Nepal, for example, because of this increased tree cover, I think they've locked up something like 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide in their trees over the last generation, which is a really impressive thing. But what we do need to do for these people is to prepare them, as I say, for the disasters that are impending. Nepal is rated as being the 9th most impacted country in the world because of climate change. And as I say, things are going to get an awful lot worse. And who's going to bear the brunt of it? It's the poorest people. It's the people from these marginalized communities. So as I see our role in the future, it is reforestation. That's very important, but it's also linked to that, supporting these communities. What a lot of these groups need are the actual skills training as well, the capacity building, to teach them some of the good agricultural practices that will allow them to sustain themselves and their families and be more resilient in the face of disaster. And that's how I see things developing in respect of Nepal. Now, this particular project is running over 2.5 years. In designing this, Dev has actually built into it a lot of training for the community and support to the community, and that's really, really important. You can't just go off and plant trees and expect that to just look after itself. You need to have the community engagement, which is what we've got here. The very next piece of news that I'm announcing this evening is that Gemma and Chris McGough Charlton Foundation have agreed a grant for a further 12 hectares just over the hill from this particular area, the same community forest user group. I'm just going to show you this little piece of film, which was sent to me by Dev. So you hear Dev speaking here, and he'll explain. It runs for 3 minutes. He'll explain what we're about to do here. And it starts off in this area, Batagadi Community Forest, which is where we've been working for the last 6 months.
This is our existing Batagadi restoration site, and within this forest patch, 2,500 meters from here, there is Murgia River, which is also known as Palwa River in Dhansadham area. So this is the only forest with permanent source of water in this forest patch of Dhamsa district, and within this patch there is 4 hectare area falling under national forest, and another one is 8 hectare, which is falling under Murgia Haryali Community Forest. Then third one is 12 hectare for which is falling under same Murgia Haryali Community Forest, and fourth one is 3 hectare. The possible plantation sites. So we have excluded this middle part because there is football playground and possibilities of conflict until the local government and community forest finalize to provide substitute of this playground. We don't want to come into conflict with local community, so we are avoiding that for now. And here is temporary dam which was constructed to study whether this holds the water inside forest, and this has become a very good opportunity for the wildlife residing inside this patch of the forest, where wild elephants, sloth bear, leopard, then hyena, spotted deer and hog deers are sighted regularly. So once we start working here, we can also document them, and nearest to this patch, so many encroachments we can cite, and this is 3 houses newly constructed after encroaching the land, and every year elephants come and destroy this house. So this shows how important this patch can be for the wild elephants and other wildlife as well. So in total, we have 4 plus 8 plus 12 plus 3 for now, and if this dispute of this playground is solved, then another 8 hectare will be there for plantation. Thank you.
It does highlight the issues here of, as I say, it's not just a case of planting trees, it's doing things in harmony with the community. There are issues of animal-human conflict, so elephants trampling houses and crops. There's also dangers from big cats and things like that. And then there's also just the community issues as well. So the kids want a playing field or something, they don't want trees planted on it. So it requires quite a bit of diplomacy and negotiation. That's a view over the sort of the area that's going to be reforested, but it'll provide really vital cover for an important wildlife corridor in that part of Nepal. Not to mention lots of work for the people. Moving on, that's obviously a very big scale project and very exciting. On the 1st of June, we'll be launching a smaller scale project, which is actually an urban reforestation exercise, and that's in Janakpur itself. This is an open space, a central park in Janakpur, which used to be a military camp, but it's of huge cultural significance to the people in this community, because this was once upon a time the base of the Tirhut army that was based in South Nepal. And it's a bit, probably the closest analogy I could give is to say it's a bit like Culloden in Scotland. It has those kinds of associations, and the people are very proud of this tradition that they have there. At the minute, it's totally empty, but we're going to be doing a rapid reforestation of this. And the challenge, I mean, I've already been sort of collecting funds for this more on an individual basis and from small groups and so on, so we can do this a little bit at a time. It's really important because urban reforestation is a big thing these days as well, and it's something that everybody can do. Not only does it improve the natural environment, but it improves the urban environment as well, in terms of having a cooling effect, in terms of removing pollution and the like. I'm really struggling at the minute to work out how to raise the balance of funds for this. I've got lots of ideas. Now, this is where the overlap of our project activities becomes very important. Just to remind you, there are 4 main areas in what we're doing: the support development of abused children, mental health and rehabilitation, empowering girls and women, the community support and education, which I've mentioned, and then the environment and climate change. Just looking at the second element there, empowering girls and women, There's a number of things that we have been doing for quite some time, one of which has been running a silver jewellery workshop in Kathmandu. I showed this picture on Facebook recently, and someone was horrified. They said, "How old is that person?" And that girl looks like she's about 12. I think she's 19, if I remember correctly. Obviously, I call them girls. All the girls at the workshop are young women. They're 19 and above. So appearances can be deceptive. Anyhow, these girls are in training at the minute, and the challenge really is to not only train, but to also have them making things for which there is a market. And what we're looking at the minute are these, and these are so-called treacellets, which you may have heard of. I know there's a company in the UK, which is, you can look them up. They're called treacellet.co.uk. And they're making these bracelets essentially, and they're selling them at about 15, 16 pounds, I think. And the idea is that a certain percentage goes towards planting trees, and this company is aiming to plant 1 million trees around the world. What we're looking at here, we're looking at, first of all, the background is a pipal leaf, a very distinctive shape with a long point, but that's just a bit of artistry, if you like. The bracelet themselves, those are pipal seeds, which look like these little Ferrero Rochers. And then you'll see the silver latch there, which is actually our logo. Felicity Denby, who's on the call this evening, our volunteer silversmith, has been working on this, and thanks very much to Felicity for that. We're looking now at upscaling this, how to present it, how to package it, and then how to sell them. So this is sort of work in progress, but hopefully this is a nice way how we can overlap our empowering of girls, our jewellery, with the environmental side of things. There are other things on that treacellet website which are intriguing me. For example, as well as selling bracelets, they're also selling things like cloth bags and so on. Of course, our girls are making bags as well. So I think rather than going down a route of making things which I think we really struggle to sell in the current climate, aim for something that has a direct link to the environment, and I think that will give us better opportunities in the future. The other little idea which occurred to me the other day, I was out walking the dogs, and I passed this post in the forest, and when I looked close to it, there was a post with a little sort of memorial plaque on it. And again, we can do the same kind of thing in the forest in Janakpur, remembering a loved one or loved ones, or commemorating a club, an organization, or anything like that. So I think this is where we get down to a much smaller scale form of donation, but where it all adds up to quite a considerable sum of money that will allow us to do the urban reforestation. That's pretty well what I wanted to say, apart from just to follow on from today's email that went out to everybody, where I was very pleased to announce that our girls' shelter has finally opened, only just, in Danusha district. This was sort of rounding off how I started the presentation. I went down in February last year to research this possibility. It has taken us a year to get to this point, obviously because of COVID and all the restrictions that came with that. It has only been possible to set up this facility through collaborating with another charity in the UK, another small charity, which, like us, works only in this part of Nepal, called Our Sansar. And my friend and colleague Julia Krepska, she's been working so hard to find a really good building in the midst of what is essentially a very, very poor area, and a building that has the right space and so on. And it's still, to a certain extent, it's work in progress. We have the building now. We're appointing the staff. We still need to get those clinical services, the support services for managing, rape survivors and other victims of abuse. It is extremely difficult to find that level of expertise, certainly in this part of Nepal. It's a very inhospitable part of the country, which is one reason why we are there. Nobody else wants to be in this part of Nepal. So it's very hard to find a professional who, in that part of Nepal, most professionals would rather be in one of the big cities like Kathmandu, or working abroad for that matter. So again, I think we're going to be quite reliant on volunteer services in the future for support to local councillors and so on. But to say, that's work in progress. Huge challenges still lie ahead, but at least a milestone has been passed today, and I'm very pleased that we've reached this point.